2018, and he earned his bachelor's degree in aviation management from the University of Wisconsin in 2020. So we'd like to welcome Joey.
Thank you very much, Tyler. I'm just going to get my presentation on here real quick. Alright, the presentation title for tonight is, Aircraft Maintenance Pilots Can Perform. Just a little bit about me, like Tyler had said. My name is Joey Schimnich. I am an aircraft mechanic and a certified flight instructor here in St. Cloud. I also work on avionics systems as well. So the picture to the, which would be your guys' left, is my airplane restoration project of a Cessna 150 I've been working on for the past 3+ years. I've taken that airplane all the way apart and it's pretty much ready to go back together now. And then the picture on the right is me in the tail of a Piper Arrow installing a brand new autopilot about a year ago. So I have a question for you. What maintenance tasks do you think pilots can legally perform without the help or signature of a mechanic on a certified airplane? We're going to write those down on this whiteboard here. So if you have one, just name them right now.
Oil change.
Oil change. All right.
Change
What else?
tires.
Changing tires. Okay. What else?
Light bulb.
Light bulbs? Yeah. That's a good one.
Brakes.
Wash it.
Yeah, you can wash it, but I don't think you need a mechanic to help you out with that one. All right, we'll wash it, and there was one other one.
Brakes.
Brakes, okay.
Section replacement of the PT6.
Hot section replacement of a PT6,
Sorry,
okay.
no, that was a joke. Just let you know.
It's on the list.
Okay, sorry. It was a joke.
Well, the bottom one I can tell you is a no for right now, but the other ones are all very good suggestions and guesses, and we're actually going to talk about them right now. So the first one is landing gear tires. So changing tires is allowed. So it's the removal, installation, and repair of landing gear tires, and that includes nose wheel and main tires. So airplane tires are considered split rim tires, so when you take them apart, both rims come apart, unlike a car where it's just a solid rim. So an airplane tire is actually pretty easy to take apart and put back together, but I would definitely do it with someone who's done it before. They can be a little bit of a hassle to do, and there are some special tools that are required as well, but you can do them.
Baby powder.
Yeah, I actually need baby powder or talcum powder to put them back together. So on some airplanes, and that airplane's got them, it's bungees. So on usually tailwheel airplanes, some of them will have bungees on their landing gear, which is just right in between the main tires, and you can see it in the picture up there in this black sleeve. And those bungees get changed every 5 years is the recommendation. It's just over time, the bungees get worn away and they can break. And the bungees also have a special code in them. So when the bungees get wrapped, they've got this little band, or actually 2 colored bands that go around the bungees. And we can, as a mechanic, I can tell which year and which part of the quarter that bungee was manufactured. So then based on that, I can actually tell when it needs to be replaced.
Hey Joey,
Yes.
does that qualify as a time-sensitive part? Is that one of those airworthiness time-sensitive parts?
It's not necessarily airworthiness or time sensitive, I guess.
It's got a 5-year life though, right?
Well, yep. So it would be considered airworthiness as if it was brought in for an annual inspection, the mechanic would be checking that and then probably replacing it. It's a suggested replacement. It really depends on the maintenance manual and which aircraft it is. But I would definitely change it every 5 years.
So hey Joey, I was going to ask that question if he didn't. So if it comes off the shelf and it's been sitting in St. Cloud Aviation shelf for 2 years, does that mean there's only 3 years left since it's already paid?
That is a good question. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I would suggest that they do have a shelf life of 5 years, so I would say that it will expire in the next 3. That's why we don't keep bungees on the shelf. We special order them. Next one here is servicing landing gears. So this would be servicing a shock strut of some kind. So this is called an oleo strut. In every oleo strut, there is a air and a liquid charge or oil charge. The oil is usually hydraulic fluid. MIL-H5606 is the red hydraulic fluid that most certified airplanes use. And there's an air charge, which is typically nitrogen, that can be serviced. While the oil is there's a process to putting the oil in a shock strut. The nitrogen is fairly easy to do. Is there any questions so far?
Okay, one general question.
Yes.
So, look at brakes and landing gear and tires on light aircraft, what's the limit? When I buy my King Air, can I do a tire, or my, flying for Endeavor, budget cuts, are they gonna make the pilots start doing?
It depends on your operation, though. So if you own that King Air under Part 91, it's your personal flying airplane, you can still do the maintenance on that airplane.
Part 90, okay, so that's the.
So
no
if
matter
it was,
what it is, if it's Part 91, I can do it.
yep, if you have to be the owner of the airplane, though.
Okay, well,
Yep, so you have to have at least a private pilot certificate and be the owner or operator of the aircraft. And that gets into another thing when the airplane, such as Steve, flies as a Part 121 airplane, uses the airlines. They also have Part 135 operations, which are charter flights. You can't, a private pilot cannot do the maintenance on those airplanes. They're operated differently than these general aviation airplanes, which are operated under Part 91, which is just general operating rules. Tires. Wheel bearings. So you can service wheel bearings. You can actually take the wheel bearings out of the wheels and service them by putting grease in them. I would suggest that you do this with the mechanic first. The reason being is because not all grease is created equal. Yes, it's slippery. But when you combine greases together, you can get a mixture that it actually stiffens up your wheel bearings and can seize them up. So if you are going to change or you are going to put grease or clean the wheel bearings, clean it out to the wheel bearings first, get rid of that old grease, and put in new aviation grease. And I find this picture kind of funny. There is a tool that mechanics use to put grease inside wheel bearings, and that tool is right there. So he's putting it in by hand, I think, just for a demonstration. But yeah, right. So you can replace defective safety wire and cotter keys or cotter pins. So this is definitely a defective piece of safety wire right here. It should not go across like the bolt on the top, and it shouldn't look loose. It should be nice and tight. And then the cotter key on the left side, or cotter pin, that is how aviation puts on cotter pins for the most part. There are a couple exceptions. So this would come into play when you're changing your oil and you have to take the oil filter off the airplane. You have to put safety wire back on the airplane. So this regulation lets you do that.
Joey,
Yes.
if it's an oil filter versus an oil screen,
Same thing.
it's the same thing, okay?
Next one, 6 is lubrication of the aircraft controls. So it's lubrication not requiring any disassembly other than removal of non-structural items such as upper plates, cowlings, and fairings. This is what your oil change falls under. So the picture that I have labeled here, this is me and a friend of mine greasing the jack screws on a flap of the B-17 at EAA. There's 4 of them. It was fun. Next, we have some simple fabric patches. I know that we have a lot of fabric airplanes in EAA, and so making of simple fabric patches not requiring any rib stitching or the removal of structural parts or control surfaces in the case. And in the case of balloons, the making of small fabric repairs to envelopes not requiring load, tape repair, or replacement. So if that fancy new airplane sitting behind everyone here all of a sudden got a hole in the side of the fuselage, someone ran into it with something, I don't know. And as long as, and if it was a certified airplane as well, experimental, by the way, this is not, none of this counts for experimental. But if it was a certified airplane and it got a hole in it, a private pilot can actually, it's called doping in a fabric patch without help of a mechanic, as long as they know how to do it. That's the caveat with a lot of these things. As long as you know how to do it, you can do it. Next is replacing hydraulic fluid. So this is replenishing hydraulic fluid in the hydraulic reservoir. These are typically on like retractable gear airplanes, such as a 182RG. That's actually the power pack, which is the motor and hydraulic fluid in one unit of a 182RG. A lot of people have hydraulic reservoirs for their brakes, such on a Piper PA-40 or Piper Cherokee. So private pilots can replenish the fluid in those. You can touch up paint. That's a little bit more than just touching up paint, but you can finish decorative coatings on fuselages, balloon baskets, wing tail group surfaces, excluding balance control surfaces. You can do fairings, cowlings, landing gear, cabin, cockpit, interior. When removal or disassembly of any primary structure or operating system is not required. So, I go for it.
Joey, why can't you paint a balanced control surface?
Very good question. I was just about to touch on that. So, a balanced control surface is one of the 3 primary controls. It is a flap, or sorry, not a flap, elevator, rudder, or aileron. You cannot, a private pilot cannot paint those controls because those controls are balanced, so that way when the airflow goes over the wing or when the airplane's flying through the air, you get equal balance on both controls. So when the airplane comes out of maintenance, those controls are balanced.
So who does that?
A mechanic.
Mechanic paints it?
The mechanic can paint them and then balance the controls. So in most controls, you're gonna have some sort of weight in the airplane, like a lead or steel on the airplane's wing, or sorry, not the wing, but the control. And that can be drilled out or it can be added to, and that's how you balance controls.
Out of curiosity, could you paint the plane and then have a mechanic balance the control?
You would have to talk to the mechanic about that. So you can work together with the mechanic, and if you paint the airplane, I would talk to them first about painting controls, and then And then if they're okay with balancing the controls that you painted, then that'd be okay.
And what would be the most likely problem with the balancing of an elevator?
The flutter, yeah.
Not good.
No, it's not good. Flutter is not nice at all. Next, you've got applying corrosion inhibitor. So this is essentially a preservative or protective material to components where no disassembly or any primary structure or operating system is involved, and where such coating is not prohibited or not contrary to good practices. So this is common for pickling engines. Say if an engine was going to sit for a very long period of time, you'd use some special preservatives to spray inside the engine and the cylinders. You can take the spark plugs out. That's not disassembling any major structure of the airplane, engine, or otherwise, and preserve the engine. Next is repairing upholstery or decorative interior. You can repair upholstery, decorative furnishings of cabin, cockpit, balloon basket, interior. When the repair does not require disassembly of any major or primary structure or operating system, or interfere with the operating system or affect the primary structure of the aircraft. So as long as it's not interfering with your controls, you're okay to repair it. It does not include replacement though. So it's only repair.
Hey, Joey,
Yes.
back to the pickling of the engine and other preventing corrosion. Does that apply to the use of Corrosion X and other similar products for the interior of the body of the aircraft?
As long as you're not painting the airplane, that's I think the key factor here. Is if it's like an oil-based corrosion inhibitor, then it's fine. I can't remember what Corrosion X is, but for the life of me.
This is gunky stuff that is used on primarily older aluminum structures. Interior of the wings, interior of the fuselage, antennae, and the spar area over the spar. Not to be confused with annealing or any of those things, but they spray this stuff on.
They just spray it in there.
Yeah,
I
it
would say
kinda
that.
half dries up.
I say that is okay then. It's not paint, it's a corrosion inhibitor or preservative, your protective material to components where no disassembly is required, so you'd be good. Any questions with the upholstery or decorative interiors? No? Next we have the small sheet metal repairs. So making small, simple repairs to bearings, non-structural cover plates, cowlings, small patches, and reinforcements not changing the contour so as to interfere with proper airflow. So this was a repair that was done to a Cessna 150 cowling. It used to, this hole here used to have a big chunk taken out of it. So we had this cowling repaired. We just put a patch over the top, reinforced it on the backside, and it's now it's a legal repair. Private pilots can replace side windows on their airplanes. So you can purchase the window from a window manufacturer. I think there's one in Wisconsin, and you can replace side windows where that work does not interfere with the structure or any operating system such as controls, electrical equipment, and etc. So Cessna 150, 152s, 172s, most 100 series airplanes, the windows look like this where they open up. Private pilot can change those out, no problem.
Hey Joey.
Yes.
Would that apply to a standard window? Let's say if you ordered one or had one made with a pocket, polycarbonate pocket, you could open up for photography or something. Would that require an STC?
Yes, because they're changing the
They can't
airflow
just put any
around the
window in
airplane.
there. You gotta put in an approved window for that certified.
Yeah, because you have to put in a window that's comparable to the one you took out. So you can put in, say you had a window that was just a clear window, and you bought a window that was UAV protectant, or has a UAV protectant in it, but it's the same shape, that's fine. You can change those out, but you can't put in like a bubble window in place of a flat window like this.
Thickness doesn't make any difference?
Thickness really doesn't make a difference. It's not going to change the airflow around the airplane. You can replace safety belts. So if you were going to replace an arm-safe safety belt like that on your airplane, I'd be cautious because some of those seat belts are wired into the airplane, and if you end up cutting a line of some kind, this airbag goes off. So just be cautious on some of these seat belts. But this also does not include if your airplane was just certified for lap belts, which by the way is kind of dangerous just if you're running with lap belts, but most people do it anyways. But pretend you wanted to put in a shoulder harness of some kind, so it's now considered a 3-point seat belt. You'd have to get an STC, or sometimes there's just a minor change required, and you'd need an A&P to do that. And STC, by the way, supplemental type certificate. It's a change to the airplane, essentially a modification. Next is replacing seat parts. So you can replace seats or seat parts with replacement parts approved for the aircraft, not including disassembly of any primary structure or operating system. So you can remove seats out of your certified airplane and basically take it all apart, put it back together, and if there's any parts that need to be replaced, you can replace them. Next is repairing landing light circuits. So whoever said light bulbs, landing lights are included. So you can troubleshoot, repair broken circuits in landing light wiring circuits. So this does not include navigation, strobes, or anything. It's strictly landing light circuits. So this is a circuit on the back of a Cessna 150 circuit breaker panel. Well, this is a fuse panel. I now updated it to a circuit breaker panel.
Joey, is there a difference on those, spade plugs that plug on there? They gonna be a certified taste for
These plugs,
the blue and red ones? Yeah.
these ones.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so those are aviation switches. I'm not quite sure if those are aviation hardware, though. Sometimes it's just on there and kind of just leave it. If it's working, why fix some things? And there's changing the light bulb, so you can change bulbs, reflectors, and lenses of position and landing lights. So these are a couple of LED landing lights. Question for you, do you think you can change your landing lights from incandescent light bulbs to LED light bulbs without the help of a mechanic?
Yes.
You actually can't.
Really?
Yeah, those LED light bulbs are STC'd, so you need to be able to make that change. So you can change out wheels and skis. You can replace wheels and skis where no weight and balance computation is involved. Most of the time, people with wheels and skis will have two types of weight and balances, one with wheels, one with skis, and if you can have skis and wheels. Yes?
Going back to the part where you changed your panel from a fuse panel to a breaker panel, did you need an STC for that? It was kind of an upgrade?
It needs a 337. It's a major alteration going from fuses to circuit breakers. So it's not an SDC, but kind of similar paperwork needs to be done.
Because it's a little more major, I suppose.
Yep, it's a little more major.
Just curious.
Yes.
Back to your lights, if it's okay, but do you guys check those when you do annuals and stuff like that to make sure they're PMA STC?
I'm personally not gonna look at it too hard. Like if it was done 10 years ago and I turn on the landing lights and like, oh yeah, that light works. Yeah, I'm not gonna be a stickler on, as long as I'm not taking it apart for any reason,
Sure.
to see if it is actually PMA stamped at all.
I just say that because I hear that a lot. I'm gonna go to the local O'Reilly's and go get an LED light,
Yeah, and some people do that. Depending on the mechanic, they actually might install it. I'm not gonna do that. Sorry, Mark. So you can replace your cowling. So replacing any cowling, not requiring removal of propeller or disconnection of flight controls. It's fairly simple. It's just taking the hood off. It's like taking the hood off your car, except there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 pieces. Next, we've got spark plugs. So you can replace or clean spark plugs and setting spark plug gap clearance. So these are 2 different types of spark plugs we got on aviation airplanes. The one on the right is called your massive electrode spark plug. This is the most common type of spark plug, and private pilots can set this gap in between the electrode and the side, or yeah, you can set that gap. And then the spark plug on the left is called your fine wire spark plug. Those are more expensive. They're not as common because they're more expensive. So you can set the gap between the wire and the electrode, but I'd be very cautious about setting that gap because that fine wire, I can't remember what it's made out of for the life of me, but it's not a normal like steel or anything like that. It's very brittle, so if you go to try and bend it, it actually might snap off. Then there goes your $80 spark plug.
Joey?
Yes.
The one on the left, is that, you still use a magneto with that?
Yep, you still use a magneto with those. Yep, it's just called a fine wire spark plug. They act the same when they're in the engine. Yeah.
I heard there's STCs for electronic ignition for one.
Yep.
You could use both of those spark plugs, right?
Yes, it might depend on the SDC. I personally have never looked into it. Some of those electronic mags might require a certain spark plug
Told me to do that.
to put on
At
an
least have one of them
electric mag.
have electronic ignition.
That's perfectly fine.
I don't think my Surefly said anything about the specific type of spark plug.
Yeah, it shouldn't because usually those Surefly mags will have to be approved with whatever spark plugs are approved for that engine. Next is replacing hose connections. So you can replace any hose connections except hydraulic connections. So these are most commonly found for like vent lines from your battery box outward of the airplane, or some fuel lines too. You can replace those.
Case breather?
Depends if it's a hose or not. If it's a
I think I've got a section that's like it's a metal part, then it's a section of hose and it's metal again. Can I replace
Yep, you can replace that. It has to be with a similar material though, just make sure you're clear with that. You can replace prefabricated fuel lines. So if you've got a fuel line that runs from, say, from Cessna 150s, there's a fabricated fuel line that runs from your gasolator to your carburetor. It's a set fuel line. There is a part number for that. You can order that specific fuel line and change it out. No problem. And just requires logbook entry. You will be covered in fuel if you do that. Next is replacing or cleaning filters. So cleaning and replacing fuel and oil strainers or filter elements. You talked about the screen. This covers the screen. Next is your batteries. So you can replace and service your batteries. Nothing really special with batteries. Most people can take them out of their cars, no problem. The aviation is pretty much the same way. As for hot air balloon pilots. We don't have it here tonight, but you can clean the burner pilots and nozzles. So it's just the main nozzles in a burner. That's it. Removable of fasteners, so lots of screws or quick turn fasteners like these. You can change those out with no issue whatsoever. And then changing out balloons and baskets. So basket and balloon can be changed out interchangeably for the most part per the type certificate on the airplane or aircraft, I guess. Yeah. Next is your anti-misfueling devices. So I've never seen anti-misfueling devices on airplanes, but you see them a lot on the hoses. So I'm not sure how many years ago it was, but pretty much when jet fuel was just starting to become readily available to the public, there were issues with linemen actually filling up avgas airplanes with jet fuel. Avgas airplanes do not burn jet fuel. So when the pilot could start up the engine, no problem, but when he'd go to try and take off, his engine would not develop power, it just would overheat. So some airplanes had anti-misfueling devices installed, and private pilots could actually install these. Most commonly, you're going to find what you'll see on the right here is actually the nozzle was changed out to where jet fuel had the wider nozzle than avgas. So the jet fuel nozzle would not be able to fit inside an avgas airplane. So solving a problem right there. And the nozzle on the right is a typical avgas nozzle. Next is your magnetic chip detectors. So in case that hot section of that PT6 all of a sudden decided to shred itself, you can change out your chip detectors. And then number 30 is not really any item in particular, other than it's the all-encompassing one. So this part of the regulation says that as long as the private pilot has received some sort of training on that aircraft and the aircraft's maintenance manual or operating manual lists preventative maintenance items that are not listed underneath this, if they're not listed in this program, that private pilot can actually do those items as long as it's listed somewhere. And then last but not least is removal of most front-mounted radios. There are a few exceptions. Those would be some transponders, some DME equipment, and automatic flight control or autopilot equipment. The reason being is that those systems sometimes have a pedostatic line that's actually hard. It's connected right to the back of the radio, so you go and try to pull that instrument out, and you take that line off, you are now opening up the pedostatic system. So you cannot remove some of those pieces of equipment. A lot of these new transponders and autopilots, most new autopilots don't really require any pedostatic line whatsoever, but and some transponders don't either, but just to be on the safe side, don't try to remove your transponder or autopilot, or if you have a DME still, without some help. So that leads us to just another last part of this presentation, and I've mentioned it a few times. It's who can perform preventative maintenance. And it's the holder of at least a private pilot certificate issued under Part 61, who is the registered owner or co-owner of the aircraft, or the A&P mechanic. And then so let's pretend that you go and change your tire on the airplane, which is a fairly simple task to learn and do. What should be included in that sign-off? First of all, it's the description of the work performed. what was done, how it was done, and nothing else. Some people like to, I can't remember what I used to do, but mine were very detailed, and they didn't need to be that detailed. It's just simply what was done, how it was done, that's it. If the work performed was extensive, include reference documents. This could be maintenance manuals, advisory circulars, any document you used to do the repair or maintenance, date of the work completed, and lastly, the signature and certificate number and kind of certificate held by the person approving the work. The signature constitutes the approval for return to service. Are there any questions? Yes, Mark.
Mark and back. Can you swing a compass?
Cannot swing a compass.
That has to be done by,
A repair station.
interesting. Did I know? And why is that?
So typically when you're going to swing a compass, you're going to be doing it with the installation of radios, but sometimes you just lost your magnetic compass card. So you'll either need to have a compass rose or a master compass of some kind to actually swing the compass and make sure it's correct.
Thank you.
Concerning aircraft maintenance log entries, does that apply to